Hi there, this is Candy Emmons. I'm the Operations Director with the Democratic Party of Oregon, and I'm thrilled to share this video presentation with you on how Oregon will be selecting our delegates to the Democratic National Convention this year. If you've watched a video in the last year about this process, I would encourage you to tune into this one. This does discuss the changes that we have made to allow us to elect our delegates under COVID-19, which have been some pretty substantial changes to our normal process. So this video will talk not only about who can be a delegate and what the role of a delegate is, but also how we'll be choosing our delegates this year and how any Democrat in Oregon can participate in that process. In this video, we'll cover a number of topics. First, we'll talk about the different ways you can participate in this process, who can be a delegate to the National Convention, how to register to participate in our delegate selection process, the presidential candidate right of review, vote by mail and electronic voting in this process, how we'll facilitate opportunities for delegates to campaign, how ballots will be tabulated and results will be reported, the state delegation meeting, and off to the National Convention. If you've ever participated in this process in the past, you know that historically Oregon has allocated its delegates based on the May primary. And then after the primary, we hold what's called a post-primary convention, where we elect our delegates. And those are done as district conventions across the state and a big state convention. However, due to COVID-19, it is obviously unsafe and not allowed for us to have large public gatherings in this climate. And so after considering all of the options, the State Central Committee of the Democratic Party of Oregon voted to change our delegate selection process for this year to a post-primary election. And we'll be doing that election using vote by mail, but folks will also have an option to vote online. So we can make sure that as many Oregonians as possible can participate in this process. And this is the first time we're doing this, but we're very excited to see how many people are able to participate in this new way. So in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about all of the details of the different levels of participation, but I wanted to make it clear that there are lots of different ways for people to participate in this process. You can participate by voting in the May primary that's run by the Secretary of State. You can participate by being a delegate selection voter, so you're just choosing to vote in this process. You can run to be a delegate from the district level, a party leader elected official or PLEO National Convention delegate, an at-large delegate, and we'll also select alternates, standing committee members, and we have our automatic delegates to the National Convention. And all of these different roles are different ways that you can participate in our delegate selection process. One question I get asked a lot is, what are the responsibilities of a National Convention delegate? So first of all, if you're elected as a National Convention delegate, you will need to attend the Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You will vote for the presidential candidate you're pledged to, at least on the first and second ballot as required by law. That's Oregon law. It requires you to vote for the person you said you supported on the first and second ballot. You'll vote for the vice presidential nominee to confirm them. You'll vote for the 2020 Democratic Party platform. And of course, you'll be representing Oregon Democrats and making sure that the nearly 1 million registered Democrats in Oregon are well represented at the National Convention. Over the next few slides, we'll be talking about who is eligible to run as a delegate to the National Convention at each of the different levels. So for everyone, you must be a Democrat. You must be registered as a Democrat, and you will have to be someone who will be 18 or older at the time of the 2020 general election. So by November 3rd, you have to be 18. You have to file to run and pledge your support to a presidential candidate on our website on the filing form between March 1st and May 21st at 5 p.m. That's when the deadline is to register. And you have to be approved by the presidential candidate you're pledged to during the presidential candidate right of review. And we'll talk more about the right of review in a little bit, but that's just something you should have in your head. Party leader elected official delegates have all of the same requirements as the ones I talked about on the last slide. But to be a party leader elected official delegate, you also have to be a party leader or an elected official. So a party leader would be a leader of any of the DPO's caucuses, standing committees, congressional district committees, or county party officers. Or you can be an elected official for any office higher than a precinct committee person. So if you're on a water board or a school board or a fire and water district or any number of the over 900 elected offices here in Oregon, you are eligible to run in this position. Unlike the super delegates or automatic delegates, these delegates must be pledged to a specific presidential candidate, and you file on that same filing form, and we'll be using the same balloting procedures that we use for everything else. So those party leader elected official delegates do have that one extra little piece. One thing that you should know is that there's no fee to participate in this process, to file, to run. However, if you are chosen as a delegate, you will be responsible for covering all of your own travel expenses to the national convention. We anticipate that the cost for most delegates will be between $1,500 and $5,000. I know that's a really broad range, but depending on who you are and your level of travel comfort, if you need to fly first class, you're comfortable flying coach, if you are glad to share a room with other delegates, or if you need your own room, those things can all really impact the cost of attendance for you. You are allowed to fundraise, and once you're elected as a delegate, we'll be sharing some resources with you, some guidelines on federal election activity to make sure that you're following the law there. But you are allowed to fundraise, and we will be working with our delegates to help reduce costs as much as possible, and offering some financial assistance opportunities. But I should be really clear that those financial assistance opportunities will not be enough to cover all of anyone's travel expenses. Those would be small assistance with things like food, or helping pay part of an airfare or something like that. So just keep in mind that you will be responsible for paying those travel expenses if you're elected as a delegate. Something you should also know is that the Democratic Party of Oregon and every state Democratic Party has set a priority of consideration and affirmative action goals to ensure that our delegation looks like Oregon. So for us, those we want to make sure you know that those are not quotas. We're not required to meet them, but they are goals, and we take them very seriously. And in Oregon, we've always been successful in meeting those goals. We ask voters, when you're considering who to vote for, to give priority of consideration to members of these communities, and that's African Americans, Latinx, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus people, rural Oregonians, veterans and active service members, and women. Our overall delegation will be gender balanced between men and women while allowing people who are non binary to participate. But we do want to make sure that members of these communities who are historically underrepresented in the Democratic Party are prioritized when we're making these choices. So in order to tell us what communities you belong to, when you fill out the registration form, you will be asked what communities you belong to, and you're able to self-identify for any of those communities. We don't make assumptions about anyone, with the exception of Young Democrat. That is one of our priority areas, and we do want to make sure that those folks are actually under the age of 36 at the time of the general election. So I know there are a lot of folks out there that are young at heart, but you do have to be under 36 to qualify as a young Democrat. And then this is the chart that goes over our affirmative action goals for the Democratic Party of Oregon. The details on how these percentage goals were met are outlined in our delegate selection plan in that full document. And it's based on a combination of census data and other data. We know that a lot of the communities that we're trying to reach out to are statistically undersampled. So we were able to use some public health data and other factors to determine how many of these folks are in Oregon and what percentage of the population that and the Democratic electorate that they make up. And so it's not a perfect science, but it is our best guess. And this is a great reminder to fill out your census form if you haven't done that already. It will help in processes like this for us to determine, how we can make sure that our delegation really looks like Oregon. As always, Oregon will apportion our delegates based on the results of Oregon's vote by mail primary. That's on May 19th. And just like always, you have to get your ballot into the county elections office by 8 p.m. on May 19th. So you can either put it in the mail so it gets there in time, or you can drop it off at a drop box. You'll want to make sure you check the Secretary of State's Dropbox website, as some drop boxes you may have used in the past might have changed due to COVID-19. Just like before, if you want to participate in this process at any level, you have to sign up on our website by May 21st at 5 p.m. at dpo.org/2020. On that form, you'll still tell us which candidate you want to support and then how you want to participate. So you'll tell us if you want to participate as a voter, if you want to run as a delegate to the national convention, as a district level delegate, a party leader elected official delegate, an at-large delegate or alternate. You'll still tell us your diversity and representation and what communities you're a part of. And you'll tell us how you would like to receive your ballot. So you can either receive your ballot by mail or electronically. As a reminder, just like before, the presidential campaigns do have a right of review. So after the primary, once we've told the campaigns how many delegates each candidate is awarded, they'll perform a right of review. What that means is that they can look through the list of anyone who signed up to be a delegate and remove them from the list. They don't have to give us an explanation, and the DPO doesn't have a choice in this process. So it's up to the campaign because they get to decide who their supporters are and who they want to represent their candidate at convention. So for the district level delegates, they have to tell us by May 25th at 5 p.m. if they're removing anyone from the list. And if they don't respond, that means everyone who signed up gets to run as a district level delegate. And then for the party leader and elected official delegates and at-large delegates, in this new process, they'll be performing those rights of review in between the rounds of tabulation. And I'll explain that a little more when we get down to talking about tabulation. But I just want you to have this in your head that the campaigns do have the right to do that. So now we can talk about the fun part, voting. On May 27th, we will be mailing out ballot packets to each voter who requested a vote by mail ballot. Your ballot packet will include instructions on how to vote and how to cast your ballot. We'll give every voter information on how to cast your vote online if you choose to do that instead of casting it by mail. You'll receive a ballot for any delegates that were apportioned to your candidate at the district level, also party leader elected official delegates, and at-large delegates or alternates that were apportioned to your preferred presidential candidate. A couple other reminders, there are no secret ballots in this process. That's from the DNC rules. So while your ballot isn't public, it's also not secret. And that means that when you get your ballot in the mail, it will have a spot for you to put your signature. You'll have your ballot will be barcoded with a voter ID, and that voter ID and your name will also be printed on your ballot. And that's really helpful if, say, you have two people in the same household, you'll each get your own separate envelopes, obviously, just like you do with normal vote by mail. But if you're voting sitting at the table together and your ballots get mixed up, you'll know whose is whose. And so that's really helpful. Another good thing to keep in mind is that last summer, our state central committee of the Democratic Party of Oregon voted to use a form of voting called star voting for this process. Star voting, as it's intended to be used, isn't really suitable for these kind of elections. So we've modified star voting to work for this election, which is a multi-winner election. And also, of course, our results at the end have to be balanced by gender. So the details of how that voting process works are in our delegate selection plan and are also going to be included in your palette. But the gist of it is it's very similar to a sort of ranked choice voting. So you'll get to cast a vote for as many candidates as you want that are on your ballot. and you can rank all the candidates or none of the candidates or however many you want on a scale from 0 to 5, with 0 being the worst score and 5 being the highest score. And because we're using that process, that will really help when we get to the tabulation phase. But just so you know, when you get your ballot in the mail, it will look a little bit different than what a normal vote by mail ballot looks like, but there'll be lots of instructions in there to help you cast it so it's not too confusing. If you requested to get your ballot online, what you're going to get is going to look very similar to what everyone who requested a vote by mail ballot looks like. So you'll get an email on May 27th with voting instructions, with access to your online ballot. And when you click on that ballot, it will have a ballot for your district level delegates, your party leader elected official delegates, and your at-large delegates or alternates. And then, of course, just like with the paper ballots, these are not secret. They will use a voter ID and a password that you'll get to access your ballot. So those ballots are also not secret. And those ballots will also use that form of modified star voting that we talked about before to choose your preference for delegates. So as a reminder, I want to say again that electronic balloting for a lot of elections, such as public elections, is not something that we would normally do. Because in this process, there are no secret ballots at any stage. It makes it a lot easier to use electronic ballots because by voting electronically, you're not giving up any secrecy that you would have had if you voted by mail, because our vote by mail ballots are also not secret ballots. For electronic balloting, the DNC rules require that we accomplish these 3 goals, and our voting system does do that. So the first thing is when you cast your ballot, when you vote, you'll fill out your ballot, and the first thing that happens is you get a confirmation screen. So you'll get a screen that says, here's how you filled out your ballot. Does this look right? Before you actually submit it through. So you can go back and make any changes, which is really important because we all sometimes click the wrong button when we're doing things online. The second thing is once you have submitted your ballot, you'll get an email back that tells you how you can print your ballot off or save it on your computer so that you can keep a copy of it for your own records if you'd like to do that. And then finally, we will, at the state party, will also be printing and maintaining a copy of your ballot in the event that the DNC needs to conduct a manual audit. It is important to remember that this process, our whole delegate selection process, is overseen by the Democratic National Committee. They're the governing body. So any audits would be conducted by them, but that is an option that is available for us if they choose to do that. So this voting system accomplishes all those things. It also allows us to use our star majority voting, and we feel very confident that it will be successful and increase access to this process. One question we've gotten a lot is, how am I supposed to run for delegate if I can't meet people in person at convention? And the Democratic Party of Oregon has thought through a few different options that we can provide people to help you run a successful campaign for delegate in a vote by mail environment. So the first thing is, we've always at our conventions had a voter's pamphlet where someone could pay $25 to $35, depending on the year, to submit a voter's pamphlet statement and headshot. This time we've decided to offer that free of charge. So a couple days after you filed for delegate, once we've processed your filing form, you'll get an email from us that has information on how to submit a voter's pamphlet statement if you're running to be a delegate. And so that will have a question, a spot for you to put in a voter's pamphlet statement. You can submit an optional headshot and a web link, which is a really great opportunity since this document will be produced as an online voters pamphlet this year. If you've made a Facebook page or a website or have a YouTube video or something to support your candidacy that you want to include in that voters pamphlet statement, you can include that web link right in the voters pamphlet, which is a really great opportunity for people since we won't have an opportunity to give candidate speeches and things like that. So we hope that's a resource that folks will find useful. Um, as we've done in the past, we will still provide mailing addresses of all the voters that are voting in your election to each candidate for delegate, so you can send people things in the mail. And then we will also be facilitating a listserv or kind of an email forum through the DPO. That forum will be moderated to make sure that the content is appropriate and people aren't getting spammed. And it will have an option for voters to opt out. So if you're a voter, you'll be signed up for that. But as soon as it goes live on May 27th, you'll get an email telling you how to unsubscribe if you don't want to be in that email group anymore. So that's a really useful tool because it gives candidates an opportunity to email voters, but voters get to choose whether or not they receive those emails so they're not getting spammed. So, returning your ballot. All ballots will be due to the DPO office by June 12th, 2020 at 5 p.m. We cannot honor postmarks. Unfortunately, the process that the DNC requires doesn't give us the time we would need to allow postmarked ballots to trickle in. We do have to complete this process still in its entirety by June 20th. So that leads us to something I mentioned earlier, which is that whether you requested a mail-in ballot or an online ballot, we're still going to give you access to an online ballot. We think that that's really important because, of course, the DPO does not have the infrastructure of the Secretary of State's office and our county clerks with ballot drop boxes all over the state. So if you're somebody who lives in a place where mail service is less reliable, or you're concerned about that your ballot won't be received in time, you can still go online and file that online ballot. The online ballots will use the same voter ID that your vote by mail ballot will get. And when you submit that, you'll be asked to, there'll be a statement there that says by submitting it that that's the ballot that will count. So if somehow we get two ballots in for somebody, we're going to count that online ballot over the other ballot just so we can be consistent and everybody knows what the rules are and there's no confusion. So that's why one of the big reasons why we think the online option is important for people, because we want to give people a solid chance that they know their ballot's going to get into us on time, even if mail service is unreliable or you just forget to fill it out in time. So we hope that that's an option that will work for people. Starting on June 13th, ballots will be tabulated by DPO staff, and if we need them, we will also designate volunteers. Presidential campaigns who are awarded delegates will be invited to have observers present exactly like they would have been able to if we had had our in-person convention. So that part hasn't changed, and the presidential campaigns all know that they can have their observers present starting on June 13th in our office while we're tabulating ballots. This is actually kind of exciting for them because since they don't have to have people at 6 different conventions, they only have to have them in one place. So that's actually kind of helpful to those presidential campaigns in these wild times where it's really hard for people to travel. So when it's time to start tabulating ballots, we will start with our district level delegates, just like we're required to by the DNC. Once district level delegates are done, we will pause for a moment. And like we talked about earlier, the presidential campaigns will have an option to do a right of review where they can strike any name from consideration on the party leader elected official ballot. And then once they're done with that, we'll start tabulating our party leader elected official delegates. And then after that, we'll move on to our at-large delegates, again, with that right of review in between. And then finally, we'll select our at-large alternates. For most elections, the most likely scenario is alternates would be selected from the runners-up on the at-large delegate ballot. But if a candidate doesn't receive at-large delegates, maybe because they didn't get over 15% of the vote in the state, that would be how they would not receive an at-large delegate. But if they did get a delegate, say in one congressional district, we would still have an election for them for at-large alternate. And so that's when we would tabulate that ballot if that had been what was sent to the voters. So there's a lot of what ifs in this process that we could speculate on. But since we don't know what how the numbers will shake out until after the May primary, I'm just letting you know what that will look like if, say, your candidate that you really love only got a delegate in one congressional district. And then once we're all done tabulating ballots, we think it will probably take us a day or two, depending on how many people sign up to participate in this process. We're going to take the time we need to do this accurately and well, and again, with as few people as possible, because we do want to make sure that our staff and folks helping to tabulate ballots are able to be safe and appropriately social distance. But once we're done tabulating ballots, and we have our results ready, we will send those results out via email and post them on our website at dpo.org/2020. And like I said, we'll email it far and wide so you don't miss that announcement when they come out. Finally, once we've selected all of our delegates, we will have our delegation meeting on June 20th at 10 a.m., and that will be done by phone. So typically what we do at the delegation meeting, all of those things will still happen. So we'll receive an orientation on the national convention process. Hopefully we'll have some updates by then on what that will look like, discussing logistics such as lodging and transportation. And then we, at this delegation meeting, would traditionally elect our delegation chair and standing committee members. Delegation chairs can be nominated from anyone in the delegation, and of course, standing committee members are nominated by the presidential campaigns. So for any position that only one person is running, we can do that vote by acclamation on the phone. For any position where more than one person is running, we'll send out an electronic ballot. So we'll actually ask all the members of the delegation, as well as the presidential campaign, to provide us their nominations by June 19th so that we can prepare electronic ballots if they're necessary. And the way that will work is basically we'll have our delegation meeting. Candidates running in those contested races can have a couple of minutes to give a statement or give a speech, or their designees can. And then once the meeting has concluded, we'll send out those electronic ballots, and folks will have a couple of hours to fill that out and get it back to us. And that way we can still get all of our business done by June 20th and get everything into the DNC in time. But folks have a chance to ballot for those positions if there are contested positions there, which there very well may be. Once all that's done, we will work with our delegates to prepare for the Democratic National Convention, which as of right now is scheduled to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was moved from July back to August 17th, the week of August 17th. They haven't given us specific dates that week, but it will be that week. And we will work with folks in the changing times. One nice thing about the convention being moved back is that our delegates do have more time to fundraise and prepare for convention if we proceed with the in-person convention like is currently scheduled, which is what we should all be planning on doing. If you're running, you should be planning on going in person, unless we hear otherwise. So this will be a great opportunity for folks to have that extra time to fundraise and for us all to work together to get our logistics in order. So we will be excited to share that experience with Oregon's delegates and have a great time celebrating at the National Convention. So thank you so much for tuning in to today's presentation. I hope it gave you the information you needed to participate in this process. If you have any questions, I am your first source. Again, my name is Candy Emmons. My email is candy@dpo.org, and email is the best way to get in touch. As I'm sure you know, our staff is not working from the office right now, and so I check my voicemails regularly, but I am not there to answer the phone. So email is the best way to get a hold of me, and I'm glad to answer any question you have. I know this process is complicated, even in the best of times, and that the COVID-19 pandemic has really impacted the sort of education that we would normally doing going around to different community organizations in this time. So I hope that this video helps clear things up for you. And again, any questions, there's no stupid questions. I want to make sure you have all the information you need to participate. And I hope to see you joining our delegation to the National Convention. Thank you so much.